Summer. Long days, warm nights, and the promise of adventure. We imagine bonfires, lakes, camping, and road trips, freedom from the grind. But every bright season casts a shadow. Sometimes the darkness finds us when we least expect it, turning joy into something sinister. The three stories you're about to hear are true accounts of summer fun gone terrifyingly wrong. Settle in, turn down the lights. These tales prove that even in summer, the strange and dark are never far away. Late July. The air hung thick and heavy with the promise of summer storms, the kind that roll in with little warning and leave the forest floor steaming. Four friends, me, Liam, Chloe, and Sam, decided to escape the city's suffocating heat and headed deep into Blackwood National Forest for a camping trip. We were young, eager for adventure, and blissfully ignorant of the secrets the woods held. We piled into Liam's old SUV, crammed with tents, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to last us a week, or so we thought. The forest was beautiful, a tapestry of greens and browns stretching as far as the eye could see. It was remote, miles from the nearest town, and by nightfall, eerily silent except for the crackle of our fire. The flames danced, casting long, flickering shadows that seemed to writhe and twist with a life of their own. The air grew cold as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the temperature dropped rapidly. As we laughed around the flames, sharing stories and roasting marshmallows, a sharp snap echoed from the darkness. It was like a twig breaking, but louder, crisper. We froze, our laughter dying in our throats. The sound seemed to come from just beyond the circle of firelight, where the trees stood like silent sentinels. Probably just a deer, Liam said, trying to sound reassuring, but none of us believed it. There was something about the sound, a certain weight to it, that suggested something else entirely. A deer wouldn't snap a twig with such force. Another snap. Closer this time, then a dragging sound, something heavy moving just beyond the firelight, rustling through the undergrowth. It sounded like something large, something powerful, and it was definitely getting closer. The shadows seemed to deepen, pressing in on us from all sides. Liam, ever the brave one, grabbed a flashlight and ventured out, determined to identify the source of the disturbance. He moved cautiously, the beam of the flashlight cutting through the inky blackness. He stopped, the beam of his flashlight fixed on something on the ground, then returned, his face pale and shaken. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at us with wide, frightened eyes. "We need to leave. Now," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the crackling fire. "There are markings on the trees, symbols, and something else. Something I can't explain. It's not an animal. I don't know what it is, but we need to go." We packed in a panic, throwing our gear haphazardly into bags. As I loaded the last bag into the SUV, my flashlight caught something at the edge of the clearing, a crude twig doll lying on the forest floor. It was small, almost childlike in its construction, but the empty eyes stared up at me with an unnerving intensity. We sped away, the SUV bouncing violently on the dirt road, silent until we reached town. The only sound was the engine roaring and the crunch of gravel beneath the tires. Liam never described in detail what he saw in the woods that night, only that it was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. He mentioned symbols carved into the bark of the trees, symbols that looked ancient and unsettling. He also spoke of earth disturbed as if something had been buried, or unearthed, its resting place violated. Weeks later, Sam, a photography enthusiast, found a photo from that night on his camera. He'd been experimenting with long exposures, trying to capture the beauty of the night sky. But in the shadows, barely visible, was a blurry, human-like figure watching us from the trees. We realized with a chilling certainty that we'd been observed from the moment we arrived. We were never alone. The doll, the sounds, the markings. It was a warning, a message, or maybe an invitation to something far more sinister. We never camped there again. The memory of that night, the feeling of being watched, the unsettling symbols, and the image of that twig doll haunt me still. Sometimes late at night, I still see those empty eyes in my mind, staring back at me from the darkness. The woods aren't just peaceful retreats, they're ancient, places where time moves differently and where things older than humanity still reside, and sometimes, they notice you. We were lucky to leave when we did before whatever was watching us decided to make its presence known in a more direct way. The tranquility we sought was just a thin veneer, a fragile mask over something deeply unsettling, something ancient and powerful, and it knew we were there. It had been waiting. 5 years ago, seeking respite from the city's relentless pace, my girlfriend Sarah and I decided to vacation in a quiet Maine town. We'd heard whispers of its untouched beauty, its serene beaches, and the kind of tranquility that seemed to exist only in old photographs. Little did we know our peaceful getaway would soon morph into an experience that would forever be etched in our memories. A chilling encounter that defied explanation. We spent our days exploring hidden coves and indulging in the local seafood, but it was the nights that truly captivated us. We found ourselves drawn to the beach under the cloak of darkness, loving late-night walks on the moonlit beach. The silvery glow reflecting off the water created an ethereal ambiance, a sense of magic that seemed to permeate the very air we breathed. One night, perhaps emboldened by the tranquility or simply unable to resist the allure of the ocean, we ventured out later than usual. It was nearing 2 a.m. and the town was completely silent. Drawn by an unseen force, we wandered toward a rocky outcrop that jutted out into the sea, a dark and imposing silhouette against the shimmering water. The town's lights were distant, mere twinkles on the horizon, emphasizing our isolation. It was just us, the moon, and the sea, or so we thought. The vastness of the ocean stretched before us, an endless expanse of mystery and untold secrets. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves against the shore and the distant cry of a seabird. Sarah stopped abruptly, her hand gently gripping my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the waves. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, and I couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine. At first I heard nothing but the familiar sounds of the ocean, but then I noticed it. A low, guttural humming drifted from the rocks, unnatural, vibrating through the sand and resonating deep within my chest. It was a sound unlike anything I had ever heard before, a sound that seemed to defy the natural order of things. Common sense screamed at us to turn back, to retreat to the safety of our cottage and forget what we had heard. But curiosity, or perhaps a morbid fascination, got the better of us. Against my instincts we crept closer, our hearts pounding in our chests with each step. As we peered around the edge of the rocky outcrop, the source of the humming became horrifyingly clear. In the moonlit surf, we saw them, dark, slender shapes circling in the water, their movements fluid and graceful yet undeniably unsettling. They were humming in unison, their voices creating a strange and hypnotic melody that seemed to warp the very air around us. Suddenly, one of the shapes rose higher out of the water, revealing itself in the moonlight. It was a pale, slick head with huge, dark eyes that seemed to absorb the light around them. Its features were disturbingly humanoid yet undeniably alien, a grotesque parody of human form. The humming intensified, growing louder and more insistent. It felt as though the sound was burrowing into our minds, filling us with a primal fear. Then, one shape broke from the group, separating itself from the others and gliding effortlessly toward us, its dark form cutting through the water with unnerving speed. Reason abandoned us completely. We ran, fueled by pure, unadulterated terror, our feet pounding against the sand. We didn't dare look back, didn't dare to see how close the creature was. We didn't stop until we reached our cottage, fumbling with the lock and slamming the door shut behind us, barricading ourselves inside. Sleep was an impossibility. We sat huddled together, listening to every creak and groan of the cottage, every rustle of leaves outside the window. The next morning, the beach was empty, no sign of anything strange. The sun shone brightly, the waves lapped gently against the shore, and the world seemed to have returned to normal. But we knew better. The idyllic vacation was over. We cut our vacation short, unable to shake the memory of what we had seen, unable to escape the feeling that we were being watched. We packed our bags in a daze, eager to leave the town behind and return to the familiar comforts of our city life. What were they? Creatures from the deep, evolved in the crushing pressure and perpetual darkness of the ocean's depths, or something else entirely, something beyond our comprehension? We never found an answer, and perhaps that's the most terrifying part of it all. Now, years later, I can't walk a beach at night without listening for that hum beneath the waves, without scanning the horizon for those dark, slender shapes. The ocean, once a source of peace and tranquility, has become a constant reminder of the unknown horrors that may lurk beneath its surface. The uncertainty haunts me most, the lack of any concrete explanation. We saw them, we know we did, the memory is too vivid, too real to be dismissed as a dream or a hallucination. But without any evidence, without any corroboration, we're left to grapple with the unsettling truth on our own. There's no proof, just a chilling glimpse of a world hidden in the ocean's darkness, a world that exists just beyond the reach of our understanding. It's a world that challenges our perception of reality, a world that suggests that there are forces at play that we can't even begin to comprehend. Sometimes I wonder, if we hadn't run, if we had stayed and faced whatever those creatures were, what would have happened? Would they have harmed us? Would they have tried to communicate? Or would we have simply disappeared into the ocean's depths, another unsolved mystery? That question still keeps me up at night, a persistent and unsettling thought that refuses to be silenced. The memory of that night on the beach, the humming, the shapes in the water, the eyes, it all replays in my mind, a constant reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden beneath the waves. Junior year of college. It was the summer before everything got real, before graduation loomed and the weight of the future settled upon our shoulders. We were young, carefree, and eager to escape the confines of campus life for a few precious weeks. My friends Mark, Jenna, and I were inseparable. We'd spent countless nights studying together, laughing over bad cafeteria food, and dreaming of adventures beyond the ivy-covered walls. We needed an escape, a chance to create memories that would last a lifetime. So we pooled our meager savings, dusted off Mark's beat-up vintage station wagon affectionately nicknamed the Wanderer, and set out on a classic summer road trip. The destination was vague, the itinerary non-existent. The only goal was to experience the open road and the freedom it promised. We drove for days, singing along to the radio, stopping at quirky roadside attractions and marveling at the ever-changing landscapes. But somewhere deep in the Nevada desert, our trusty wanderer coughed, sputtered, and finally died on a lonely highway. Steam billowed from under the hood, a mechanical death rattle echoing in the vast emptiness. No cell service, of course, miles from civilization, no passing cars for what felt like hours, just the oppressive heat, the endless horizon, and a distant flickering light that danced on the edge of our vision. It was the only sign of anything resembling human presence. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we made a decision. We had no choice. We walked toward it, hoping it would lead us to help. After what felt like an eternity, the light resolved itself into a decrepit gas station, a relic of a bygone era with a single bare bulb buzzing weakly above the entrance. The air hung heavy with the smell of gasoline and decay. A gaunt man in greasy overalls emerged from the shadows, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He greeted us with a slow, unsettling smile. "Car trouble, huh?" he rasped, his voice like gravel. "Happens a lot out here. This desert ain't kind to machines or people." He claimed there was no phone, no way to call a tow truck, and that the nearest town was miles away. But, with a strange glint in his eye, he offered us a cramped, windowless room behind the station to rest until morning. He said he'd take a look at the car, then. We were exhausted, stranded, and increasingly unnerved. Desperate, and with no other apparent options, we accepted his offer. The door shut behind us with a heavy thud that echoed in the small space, and we realized with a growing sense of dread that there was no lock on our side. We were trapped. We barely slept. Every creak of the building, every rustle outside the door, every shadow that danced beneath the crack tightened the knot of dread in our stomachs. The silence was almost worse than any noise. Near dawn, the sound of a vehicle shattered the stillness. Headlights swept across the boarded-up window. Voices murmured, low and indistinct. Mark, ever the pragmatist, cautiously peeked out through a crack in the door. He saw two more men, their faces obscured by shadows, loading something long, heavy, and suspiciously tarp-wrapped into the back of a beat-up pickup truck. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. We realized we were trapped in something far more sinister than a simple breakdown. This wasn't just bad luck, it was a trap. Our only hope, our only potential escape. A boarded window, nailed shut with thick planks. Adrenaline surged through us. We worked frantically, silently, prying the boards open one by one, the wood splintering and groaning under our desperate efforts. We finally created a small opening, just large enough to squeeze through. We scrambled out, ignoring the scrapes and bruises, and ran for our lives, the sound of our pounding hearts echoing in the pre-dawn air. We didn't stop running until we reached the abandoned car, a beacon of hope in the desolate landscape. Mark jumped behind the wheel, turned the key, and the engine roared to life instantly, as if nothing had ever been wrong. It was as if the car had been waiting for us, eager to escape the clutches of that place. We didn't look back, we sped away, leaving the gas station and its sinister inhabitants behind, shaken and silent, the rising sun casting long, ominous shadows in our wake. Once we reached a town with a semblance of civilization, we reported the incident to the police, but with no concrete evidence, no witnesses, and only our terrified accounts, there was little they could do. They listened politely, took notes, but their skepticism was palpable. The rest of our trip was irrevocably tainted, shadowed by fear and paranoia. Every deserted road, every flickering light in the distance, every strange sound became a chilling reminder of how quickly safety can vanish, how easily the familiar can turn into the terrifying. We never found out what was under that tarp, what secrets that gas station held, or who those men were, and what they were doing out there in the middle of nowhere. The real terror wasn't just what happened to us, but the unsettling realization of how thin the line is between a carefree adventure and a waking nightmare. That old station wagon, our beloved wanderer, somehow got us home, back to the safety and familiarity of our lives. But a part of our innocence, a piece of our carefree spirit, was left behind on that dark, desolate Nevada highway. Sometimes the scariest part of the unknown isn't the monsters themselves, but realizing how close they can get, how easily they can infiltrate the edges of your world. We never drove late at night again, especially not on unfamiliar roads. The open road lost its allure, replaced by a sense of unease and vulnerability. We learned a harsh lesson that summer. Civilization's safety net is fragile, easily torn. One wrong turn, one missed exit, and you're on your own, at the mercy of forces you can't comprehend. We survived that road trip, but the memory of that night, the gas station, the men, the tarp, never truly left us. It remains a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of the map. Some roads, we learned the hard way, are better left untraveled, their mysteries best left undisturbed. 3 summer adventures, each turning into a brush with the unknown. From shadowed woods to moonlit beaches and lonely highways, darkness can find us anywhere. These stories remind us, trust your instincts, and remember that beauty can hide deep shadows. If you enjoyed these tales, like and subscribe for more true horror stories. Have your own chilling summer story? Share it in the comments. We want to hear it. Until next time, stay safe out there, and don't look back.